Thanks, Andy. I would probably say 10 years worth of experience and probably 10 years off my life here since I took over the position. So I think that's probably worked together through that equation. Pretty exciting day for us as well is that today is actually the first day that we've had a home contest on campus as well. We have our swim and dive team competing against Eastern Illinois, getting ready to start here in just about an hour or so. So very exciting that today is really our first event truly on campus. We did have tennis and cross country compete in the fall. Tennis hosted a tournament at Center Grove. So it was hosted by us, but not actually on campus. And then cross country competed in some GLVC meets, one of those being hosted by us on the north side of town, but actually our first event on campus with swimming and diving starting today. So very exciting in that aspect. Then we have coming up here in the very near future as well as our GLVC basketball season starting the Friday after Thanksgiving. So very exciting from that aspect. We have GLVC basketball starting next week, actually kind of working through how we manage that event and those events, including in swimming and diving under the new regulations from Marion County with a limited number of people here on campus at our venues. We're kind of working through that process. But after basketballs get started, they kind of go through the Christmas holiday into the spring, and then also adding wrestling and indoor track and field as our other winter sports that start up right after the first of the year. So very exciting for those student athletes to get the opportunity to compete here in the very near future. And then everybody else joins in shortly after that once we get back from Christmas break. I think it's going to be probably, from an athletic standpoint, the busiest time that we've ever had on campus with everybody competing in the same semester. All of our fall sports, pretty much besides cross country, got moved to the spring. So that pretty much has everybody competing on campus after Christmas break, kind of starting back with wrestling, indoor track and field, basketball, leading into everyone else. So going to be a great opportunity for our student athletes and going to be a really busy time for us. This is the largest number of student athletes we've ever had at the University of Indianapolis as well. So kind of mixing that in with the crazy times of COVID. We started the semester with over 780 student athletes, which is 100 more than we've ever started the semester. So it's been definitely interesting times and pretty exciting the standpoint of, as of today, we still have 750 student athletes on our rosters as of today as we head to the end of the semester. So a lot of student athletes, a lot of desire for them to be able to practice and compete. And then, like I said, mentioned especially their opportunities to compete in the spring semester for those who haven't competed. Also should have mentioned that our men's and women's golf teams also competed in the fall semester. It's kind of those low risk sports that have been able to compete up to this point. And then we're about to kind of add in those intermediate and high risk sports. We are very fortunate, though, that we were able to provide each of our student athletes meaningful practice time in the fall semester. Every one of our high contact sports were able to go through a testing protocol and we're able to have full contact practices. So I think that was huge for our student athletes. We kind of started the semester in a very kind of toned down manner where we had everybody in mask and socially distanced. And then we were able to figure out the testing protocols and work through kind of that process and the NCAA guidelines and then the GLVC guidelines. And we're able to do surveillance testing of all of the high and intermediate risk sports, and they able to provide each of our student athletes meaningful practice opportunities in the fall. So I think that was really important for the university with keeping our student athletes engaged with the standpoint of having 750, 780 student athletes. That's big for our campus community in general, is that just that enrollment piece, and having all of those individuals have meaningful opportunities is going to be able to keep them engaged and keep them connected for the second semester. So that's kind of where we are going into Christmas break, the Thanksgiving holiday. As a lot of the individuals will start to depart campus, we'll see several student athletes around throughout break. And then probably a little bit before to the start of the semester, we're going to bring in a lot more people back to campus and be ready to go for second semester. Be glad to answer any questions that everybody has. I know everybody's kind of interested in where we're going as a department, how I see second semester playing out, how we're going to accomplish the testing that the NCAA and the GLVC are requiring and those type of things. I think that's all kind of the puzzle we're kind of working through here as an administration on campus and within the department here in the next few weeks.
Scott, I had a quick question. When does our football season start, and are they going to have a full regular number of home and away games followed by a playoff season like what we've experienced in a traditional fall season, or is it going to be a different looking season for football? But obviously any of the sports, I would probably open that question up to.
The sports that are traditionally fall sports are going to have a much different than traditional season for them because the NCAA has already canceled their NCAA championships. So you'll see probably a similar schedule for your soccers and volleyball. They're going to play a pretty normal type schedule. Football is going to be very minimal just because the coaches within the conference have decided they want to limit the number of times their student athletes are in high impact contact games from a standpoint of they don't want to see a lot of injuries leading into the following fall. So they're going to really limit their contest. They're going to play 4 games, three regular season and then 1 playoff. They also have a scrimmage scheduled, but we've decided working with Missouri S&T that we are actually not going to play that scrimmage. It just doesn't make a lot of sense working with Melissa, the AD over at S&T, for them to drive all the way over here for a scrimmage type atmosphere. With kind of the piece that the GLVC put together for those scrimmages is that it was someplace close that you could travel the day of the event. But with us kind of being the outlier geographically for our division or for our conference, that it just didn't make sense for S&T to come over to UIndy. Coach Keevers felt very comfortable that he could do an inter-squad type environment that day and have a high impact inter-squad and be able to get just as much out of that and actually provide more student athletes the opportunity to compete on that day in a high level inter-squad type activity. And then we'll move into those 3 contests, and then it will be a playoff type atmosphere where you'll have 1 playoff game against someone kind of from the other side of the conference, with kind of the first place team on our side competing against the first place team on the other side. And that it looks like that contest will be at UIndy. So you'll see 2 home contests and 2 away contests. And then a very traditional volleyball / soccer schedules where they'll play several contests, somewhere in the 20 range for volleyball, and then the typical 14, 15 for soccer, with GLVC championships available to them, but not NCAA championships. Question from Gary Kincaid here on the chat is, basically, at the current time, the only sports that NCAA championships have been canceled are the traditional fall sports. So the volleyballs, the men's and women's soccer, football, and cross country, their championships have been canceled. Everyone else is scheduled for an NCAA championship as of today. I think you'll see as you go through the semester that that's going to be very fluid, and how those championships actually play out may be a little bit different than we're used to traditionally seeing. I think you're going to see maybe smaller number of participants at some championships, depending on the number of schools that actually compete during the year. So you'll see less teams maybe, or less individuals depending on the sport. But we're very hopeful that those NCAA championships will exist for our student athletes. I know they've put in a lot of hard work this fall, and it's been very important for myself to make sure that we fight really hard for our student athletes to have meaningful opportunities to compete. Because if you have been over in the building and seen the hard work and the sacrifices they've made, they've had to make sacrifices to their social lives, to their everyday activities and practice. They did a lot more in mass, a lot more socially distanced. They did a lot more with testing and those type of atmospheres. So it's been very difficult for them, and just providing them opportunities is very, very important to me and the rest of our administration. And I feel very fortunate to be at UIndy during these times, because there are other institutions that don't feel the same way and don't have the commitment to providing opportunities to their student athletes, and being in a place where we can support our student athletes along with the rest of our students and providing them opportunities. I feel very fortunate for just being at UIndy during these times. Looking at the other questions in the chats, Another question from Gary Kincaid based on eligibility for our student athletes. Currently, all fall and winter sports fall and winter sports student athletes will not use a season of eligibility no matter how much they compete this year. So the fall student athletes that have lost their championships and the winter sports student athletes that I think everybody's understanding that their seasons are going to be impacted. And while they may have opportunities to compete for a national championship, the seasons are going to be different. I think that's just being realistic and there are going to be events canceled. There are going to be contests canceled. There are going to be things that are just different from them. So everyone will get that season of eligibility back. I think where that gets to be, it's going to be a challenging time for coaches and administrators kind of on that topic is just while the NCAA is granting them that season of eligibility back, and while they're saying that anybody that is a senior this would traditionally be their last year of eligibility, you don't have to count their scholarship dollars next year. Those dollars still are institutional dollars and not just an endless pot. So it's going to put coaches in situations where they have to make decisions on who they invite back, who incoming student athletes that they've offered scholarships to, do they have to make decisions to not bring those individuals in at this point? So while it's great for our student athletes, it is going to present some challenging time for our coaches, and they're going to have to make difficult decisions and have difficult conversations. So I think while they're excited to get some of those individuals back, there will be some that won't have the opportunity. And like I said, that's going to be difficult for coaches, difficult for administrators, but just because the NCAA is granting that scholarship exception for next year doesn't mean that there's an endless pot of money at the University of Indianapolis that can offset that cost. We'll be able to figure out some of that from just our scholarship standpoint and our budget standpoint, but not to the need of what would be if everybody decided to come back. That number would be pretty excessive and just not available here at UIndy or probably most places, especially private institutions. Next question I see from Greg, from a basketball standpoint, how do you see championships playing out in the spring? I think you're going to see a lot more on campus sites, even at the Division II level. I think that I don't know how many neutral site type competitions you'll see at Division II. I think you've seen the recent announcements from the Division I world that they're looking to play all of the championships possibly here in Indianapolis as a city and having everybody come to one city, one state to play the championship. I don't know that works from a Division II level, but I could see a standpoint where, depending on the number of teams to compete, that it's less than 64 teams competing in the Division II in the Division II tournament. And also, I think you could see more on-campus sites than actually going to neutral sites, just to provide a safer environment for our student athletes. I think that's everyone's number one objective, is to make sure that they keep their student athletes healthy and safe. And very glad to say, as of today, that while we've had positive cases within our department and had to isolate and quarantine student athletes, as of today, we have not had any significant medical challenges from anybody at this point that has tremendously impacted with lengthy hospital stays or any severe medical issues. So very fortunate for that we've been able to navigate through that and provide good care for our student athletes, even as we have had some positive cases. A question from Kirk about, is UIndy in discussion to be a site for the NCAA basketball March Madness? We have not heard anything from them directly at this point. I would think that really depends on how they decide for the championships to play out from a standpoint of, I think if they get to a point from an NCAA standpoint that they start bringing fans into the venues, I don't know that UIndy will be quite the site. But I think if they're looking for places where they have minimal to no spectators, I could see us being somebody they would reach out to with the possibility. I know from a standpoint is we do have a good facility. We would be able to provide space and lighting and those type of things that they would need. But I think it just comes down to the size of the venue they're looking for. If they're looking for something smaller, I think Nickerson Hall would be a great fit. If they're looking for bigger, then you're probably looking more at Hinkle and Bankers Life and Lucas Oil and different creative options, maybe expanding to the IUs, the Indiana States, the Ball States, the Purdues, those type of things. So I think it really just depends on how this all plays out, and probably why you haven't seen any official announcements of what they're looking for, because I just don't think they know where we're going to be at as a state, as a city, in the way of COVID coming up here in the near future. Question from Andy about fans at games. Currently, the University of Indianapolis and the GLVC has said no spectators for their winter sports. That's a decision as of today. I know the GLVC presidents will revisit that sometime in January. Once they revisit that topic, we'll revisit that here on campus. But I think that just because the GLVC allows spectators at different venues doesn't mean that's the right fit for the University of Indianapolis. We'll make those decisions based on our campus, where we're at in our re-engagement plan, and just understanding that I would never want to, as an athletic director, voting on that from a league-wide standpoint and recommending President Manuel on how to vote, to tell Quincy, Illinois, how they should operate their business in the way of and allowing spectators. And I also understand that that may lead to difficult conversations for myself, with people being frustrated that other schools are having spectators and we're not. But as our number one priority is making sure that we keep our student athletes healthy and safe, and making sure that we're doing the right things for our campus community. So we'll make those decisions, myself, President Manuel, others on campus, on what's right for us, and not really take much into consideration on what works for the rest of the GLVC. Actually had the first upset spectator today, came in my office shortly before this chat, wondering why they wouldn't be able to attend the swim meet. We were swimming against Eastern Illinois. They came over from Charleston and walked in the venue, and were a little frustrated that they couldn't go in and watch. So I think I think that's going to be the nature of the times for the upcoming semester.
But Scott, doesn't each school tell their fans the rules?
Yeah, I think that was communicated from our coaches to their coaches, but that doesn't also necessarily mean that the coaches relay it to their student athletes. I know our coaches have relayed that to our student athletes. I know I've had some statements come out on social media and our different platforms, and we'll continue to have those come out as we get closer to those basketball games coming up. But like I said, just because you relay the message, that doesn't mean it always gets to the people that truly need the message. And I think you always also have that aspect, is individuals think, well, if we show up, they won't turn us away. I think you get a little bit of that sometimes, is that if we've driven all the way from Charleston, Illinois, and we show up in the venue, they'll just make it work for us. And unfortunately, we just can't operate that way. With our swim meet today, we're currently under the Marion County restrictions of 50 individuals. So it is basically planned out to an exact number per event, who is going to be actually in the pool, where we're staging people to come in the pool, and adding a couple extra people just doesn't work. And to be honest, it doesn't even really provide an opportunity for me to go in the pool and watch the swim meet today, because when it comes to 50 people, I'm just not essential in making that operation work. I'm just a spectator from that standpoint. So it's pretty easy to say, if I can't go in and watch as the leader of the department, that probably means as a spectator from Eastern Illinois, you can't go in either. So I think that makes that conversation just a bit easier from my standpoint. Seeing from Gary Kincaid that Michigan has gone to a complete shutdown from the universities. Any chance that might happen in Indiana? I feel pretty comfortable as of today that we're in a place where we wouldn't go to a complete shutdown in Indiana. But as cases continue to rise, I would never rule that out. I think we start to plan through that process and think through and how that actually impacts our student athletes. Would we still be able to have them on campus in practice opportunities? Does that mean we can't compete here on campus? Does that mean they can't travel and compete elsewhere? I think those are things that are going to be very interesting as we go kind of through the next few weeks and few months. Because I think we're really in a situation, I think you've heard a couple of different philosophies, that after the election that the COVID situation was going to trend downward. And then you've also heard that magic date that for the longest time is that if we can just make it to the first of the year, COVID's going to be a lot better. And I think we're realizing that the election has passed and COVID is still rising throughout Indiana and throughout the United States. And then I think you can also, I think, see at this point that just because the calendar turns to 2021, I don't think COVID is just going to magically disappear as well. So I think those are things that are just realistic to where we're at. And I think there's also a lot of hope with the fact that vaccines are starting to become available, that's going to immediately impact athletics here at UIndy and other places. And I think, to be honest with our coaches and to be honest with our student athletes, is just because vaccines become available, that 18 to 22-year-old healthy college students are probably not going to be the first market for those vaccines, and that we're going to still be a ways before we have a place where our student athletes are all vaccinated, our students on campus are all vaccinated, and that we can really change the way we're currently operating. So I think we've got a long winter time ahead of us and a long spring semester ahead of us. And I think to provide false hope would be not appropriate on my end to our fans, to our parents, to our student athletes, and to our coaches. I think it's being realistic at just what's in front of us and just trying to navigate through the situations as they come about. From Andy, trying to find some positive light in a dark time. Any ideas from this year you could see carrying forward post-pandemic? I think probably one of the greatest things that we've been able to do is that we do a student athlete speaker series where we have different individuals speak to our student athletes. We've always done those speaker series here on campus and had those in person, but we went virtual with all of those this year and been very fortunate. We had a panel of, so you would like to coach. It's kind of a different opportunity for student athletes that would like to get into coaching. And we were able to bring coaches from all different sports from all over the country in to speak to our student athletes. We had an administrator panel yesterday and had administrators from all over the country. So I think that has provided us opportunities to go to a much larger scope and it not really be people just at the University of Indianapolis or just in the Indianapolis area. We're able to have Rick Odette, who is the baseball coach at St. Leo in Florida, and have one of the leaders of Greco-Roman wrestling from Colorado speak to our student athletes. And it's just, that opportunity has been tremendous. And I think that we modified our physical process for our incoming student athletes and how we organize that and just the spacing and the organization in one space. And I think there's just things that you've learned on how to make yourself more efficient that I think that will carry forward for years to come. So I think that's the exciting piece, is that some things you learn that you can actually do better virtually and socially distanced and in one venue. And it's just, I mean, it's things that you've never thought of until you have to. So there's definitely things that we will take forward that have been really beneficial for our student athletes. And then there's things that I definitely want to get back to normal. And I know everybody else would as well, is that we would love to have fans in Nickerson Hall. We'd love to have fans in the pool. We would love to be able to have high impact practices without going through testing protocols and all of those challenges, but that's not a reality today. So we manage day by day.
I have a question. So like in the summer, things like the basketball camps that you normally have, perhaps football camps, do you plan on going along with that? And also, do you have something like that for swimming as well? Do you have like a swimming club with the Greyhounds?
Yes, great questions, because I think that's something that we're starting to look at as you plan for. The summer seems like so far away with just kind of the everyday challenges, but this is now when you start planning your summer activities for what you're going to have on campus. I think that's going to be, it's one of those things I don't know that we have the answer to today. We're starting to think through those. I think as you get into May, June, July, you may see the impact of vaccines and that you may be able to safely operate camps and clinics on campus. If we can do that within university restrictions and guidelines, we definitely will, because I mean, the camp aspect is a big financial piece for our department, and the fundraising and the additional aid to benefit our program. So that's a big impact for us financially within our department. Also very important for the community to be able to bring people to campus, to connect to the Indianapolis community, to the area. So there's the big impact of that as well. So it would be huge for us if we were able to get to a place where we could do that in the summertime and in the late spring. But as of today, under the current environment, we are not bringing any outside groups to campus. That and that aspect of any facility rentals, any camps or clinics, really nothing besides opportunities for our current students and our current student athletes. We do have a regular swimming and diving club that we've always hosted here at the University of Indianapolis, that was started kind of when Coach Height got to UIndy, that we've had to move off of campus at the current time, just because I mentioned that we're not bringing any outside entities basically besides our current students, our current student athletes, and then those who are competing against us. And then really the only other group that we brought on campus is that we have allowed our coaches to bring prospective students on campus for visits. We've done some creative group visits depending on sports. Swimming and diving has had a group visit. Football has had some group visits. Other programs have had smaller visits with individual families, but very important to still allow our coaches to be able to recruit, and then just bringing prospective students to campus, not only for athletics, but for the campus as a whole.
Scott, while you're reading those next questions, I just want to tell Greg, thank you, sir. It's always good to see you. Appreciate all you do for UIndy and UIndy athletics.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I'm glad you were able to come on. And if you ever need anything, please let me know. I think as individuals think of questions or anything else that you would like to ask, I think from a standpoint of, I've kind of set forward the goals for the department for the year being a little bit different than we've probably ever had before here at the University of Indianapolis, is that we've always been focused on the academic piece, the social piece, and then being highly successful at athletics, really focused on the word win. That's very important to me, is that we win as students, we win as people, and we win as athletes. This year, I've kind of shared a little bit of a different message to our coaches and our student athletes. And this message has been really that our number one priority is that we keep our student athletes healthy and safe, being priority number one. Number two is to make sure that we make decisions within our department that are beneficial to the campus community, and that the decisions we make would not lead to a situation where the university would need to go remote. And we would not want athletics to be a cause of that from a university standpoint. So that's been very important from that aspect. And then kind of the other piece that I've really shared a message is that very important as a new leader of UIndy athletics is that the remainder of the campus community has faith in my leadership and has faith in the University of Indianapolis athletic department. We would not like to lose the faith of the rest of the campus community and what we're doing within athletics. So I've really been making every decision that I've made and we've made as an athletic administration has been based on those goals, as keeping our student athletes healthy and safe, making sure that we're not causing harm to the campus community, and then also making decisions that really at the end of the day, that the rest of the campus community has faith in myself and what we're doing within the athletic department. If you lose the faith of the campus community, it's very hard to gain that back. And we have so much support on campus for UIndy athletics. And I would not want any decision that I personally made or we've made as a department to lose that faith. So that's been kind of the guiding decisions. And along the way, we've had to make some decisions that was not the most popular for our student athletes and sometimes not the most popular for our coaches. But those decisions were made under those three goals. And I think once you sit down and explain and explain why you made the decision. And I think that's been kind of one of the things that I've made sure is that when a decision is made is that I've been very transparent to our coaches, to our administrators, to our student athletes, why that decision was made and that the thought process that went into those decisions. And even when those decisions were group decisions made by the entire campus community, is that I've always been willing to stand up in front of our group and say that these are the decisions that I'm making for the department. And if you have questions or concerns, those need to come directed at me. And it's not the coach's fault. It's not the student athlete's fault. It's not the other administrator's fault. These are decisions that I needed to make for our campus community. And that's just part of being a leader, is that you get up in front of the decisions and you stand by your decisions, and that sometimes you make tough decisions that at the end of the day, aren't the solution, but that they help with the other three objectives and making sure that we're safe, that we're not causing harm to the institution, and everyone still has faith in us as a community. See some other questions here from, lost one here from Janelle. How has the pandemic changed funding priorities for the department? Has it changed the greatest need for fundraising as well? That's a great question, Janelle. It has really impacted us tremendously, just from mentioning that the camp question, that's always been a big funding opportunity for us. You also have the aspect is that we've always operated rentals. We've had high school football games here in Key Stadium. We've hosted high school indoor track meets. We've had individuals rent our facility, St. Francis Soccer Club, those different opportunities that have been tremendous fundraising for our programs. We've had a huge Red Cobra wrestling event that has brought in a lot of money for the wrestling program and the department. Those things have kind of went away. So that's been a major impact from that aspect. And then you just figure in that, to be completely honest, it is very expensive to operate in COVID from a athletic department standpoint. As you start to look in what is necessary for our student athletes to have an opportunity to practice and compete, that it has changed the funding and mindset, and that it is a challenge to figure out how you're going to be able to make that work cost effectively. But that's one of those things, is that I think we're going to work very hard here over the break and work with Andy and Janelle and Chris and Matt to figure out ways to help fund our department going forward in the spring, and to make sure that we're able to provide our student athletes the opportunity to compete. That is the meaningfulness of that for our student athletes and for our campus community is something that you can't sell, and you can't put a price on it. It means so much for those student athletes to practice every day and have that opportunity to compete. So as we look at these difficult decisions and the cost that is involved with the testing and just the aspects of being able to provide our student athletes opportunities, you need more money to travel because you need to provide more busing. You need to provide more hotel space just to keep student athletes safe. That the answer in a lot of places you see across the country is that we're just going to shut down and we're not going to provide those opportunities. And for us here at the University of Indianapolis, I would never tell other groups how to operate, but here at the University of Indianapolis, that is not an option. The option is to figure out how we make this work, how we make the funding work, how we make the cost work, because it's too important to everybody that's put in the work. Our coaches, our student athletes, the rest of campus, our administrators, the hours and hours and hours that have went into the fall and those opportunities, is that we have to figure it out as a department, as a university, because that's the only option we have. And we owe that to our student athletes. And I personally owe that to our coaches, because they've done a lot. Our sports medicine staff that has basically navigated a lot of COVID for our student athletes and working through all of those scenarios and keeping everyone healthy and safe. I think at this point, to tell any of those groups that it's no longer possible and we can't figure this out, that would be a real disservice from me, and that it's going to be challenging and it's going to take a lot of support from everyone. And that's individuals on this call, individuals that are supporters of UIndy athletics, mean, we're going to need all of your help here second semester, whether that be watching from the GLVC Sports Network and sharing the good things we do, to those who are able to financially support UIndy Athletics and the Greyhound Club. All of those things are going to be huge for us as we start competing here the rest of this winter and in the spring. It's going to be a challenge, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to provide those opportunities for our student athletes, because I feel like that's my obligation to everyone that has put in all the work to get to this point today. From next question from Kirk: what are your thoughts on organizing a student athlete focused career fair? I think anything that we can do to provide opportunities for our student athletes, I mean, every other year, and I think still our number one priority is that the education. Our number one priority here at the University of Indianapolis is that our student athletes have that opportunity for that University of Indianapolis degree. As Andy mentioned, proud two-time alum myself, and that's providing that opportunity to all of our student athletes is the number one priority. That will not change. We just mix that in with the keeping them safe and the other goals. But I think that career fair and anything that we can provide for them as part of that educational piece, I think that individuals that hire UIndy students and UIndy student athletes, you hear over and over again, is that they're elite employees once they leave here. That's not just student athletes, that's all of our students. We do a great job here on campus of preparing others to leave UIndy and be a part of the workforce and be community leaders. I think that's always been a priority for us as well, is that we want our student athletes to be leaders on campus. And I think anything that we can do to provide our student athletes opportunities to get in front of employers, I think that when they get to know our student athletes, they immediately are offering them job opportunities just because of how they sell themselves. They see their resumes, they see what they've accomplished in the classroom, what they've done in the way of community service, and that athletic success as well, is that the time management skills and all of those skills that they learn as being student athletes. I think that's just huge. And I think any way we can partner with you, Kirk, to make them more marketable and prepare them for leaving here. I think all of our objectives, everybody that's a UIndy employee, is that we hope that when someone leaves the University of Indianapolis, they're better than when they arrived on campus, whether that be academically, socially, athletically, just more prepared to go out into society and make a difference. I mean, they make such a difference here on campus, but just the difference they can make out in the community as well. And I think just others being able to see what we see each and every day inside our walls.
Scott, how do you think the morale of the student athletes has been in the midst of all of this? I'm sure that's been a high priority with the coaches.
I think that the morale has been up and down, as you could expect. It's really high when they get those opportunities to practice, and then it gets pretty low if someone has to go in quarantine or we need to shut a team down just because of a number of cases. And when we went through a time period where we actually shut down everybody that wasn't in season for a couple of weeks, just to kind of help get a control of COVID here on campus and within our department. So you've seen a lot of really highs and a lot of really lows. But I think the piece that has been the most meaningful to me is that when they're actually practicing and in those full practices, and when you see football having contact, or when you see soccer having a true practice, or wrestling in the room and competing, when basketball's on the court in full practice, when you see those full practice opportunities, and as you're probably going to see today with the swim meet and upcoming, when the student athletes get an opportunity to compete, the highs are higher than they've ever been for those things. I think they appreciate those more than ever. So I think, unfortunately, the lows have been really low, but the neat thing is to see that the really highs have been really high. So I think it's been really exciting to see that. And then our coaches have been absolutely amazing. The rest of campus has been amazing in supporting our student athletes during those low times. Just the mental health care that we have with our partnership with Community Hospital, with Kelly Miller and the counseling service here on campus, those groups, along with Corey Vitangeli and that aspect, and working through the contact tracing and the contact tracing team and helping our student athletes if they need to quarantine or isolate, those have all been tremendous. And then I couldn't say again how much work our coaches have put in, because they've all had to change their focus as well. I mean, those of you that know coaches, they know that, Gary, you've been a coach, is that the number one thing you want to do is coach your sport, make your student athletes better at your sport while helping them get an education, while making them better people. But now there's been a lot more focus on morale and keeping the student athletes up during difficult times and managing COVID situations. I know they would all want it to be different. I know that I would like my job to be different, but I think it's just amazing that the efforts that everybody have put together to provide these opportunities for our student athletes. Like I said, as you mentioned, the highs have been really high and the lows have been low, and it's just supporting them through all of that has been, I couldn't say thank you to everybody that's been a part of that any more than, I mean, every day it's just, you feel blessed to be at UIndy with so many great people that have made all of this happen. And that when you see colleagues other places where it's failed or where it hasn't worked and they've just shut down, or coaches are going on furloughs, and you just see bad situations, and then you feel fortunate to be at UIndy. And it's been tough for all of us, but we all are very fortunate to be at a great place with great people. And I think the other group that has been just tremendous, I mentioned them earlier, has been our sports medicine staff. Brian Gerlach and our sports medicine staff has been tremendous in leading our teams through COVID. They've helped navigate that. They've worked so directly with the contact tracing with Corey and just the team effort. I think you see so many different places where coaches aren't, or where the athletic department is working in a silo. And here at UIndy, it has really been a team effort in that every day we're communicating and working together. And I think that the other piece is that I've learned very quickly as we've went through this is that in a lot of places, the head of sports medicine and the AD are not in a good relationship and are not working together. And myself and Brian speak to each other at least 5 times a day, and that every decision that's made for our athletic department, we work through together. We have different perspectives. I mean, I have a university perspective. I have a competition perspective. He has a health and safety perspective, and the two of us working together. And to say that we've agreed on everything would be false, but we've always been able to either have a phone conversation, sit down in the office, work through different scenarios, so that when we walk out and when we share a message with our coaches, with the campus community, with our student athletes, that we are always in unity together. Because if it's been a disaster at other places where sports medicine has made decisions that the AD doesn't agree in, or vice versa, where the AD has made decisions that the sports medicine staff doesn't feel is healthy and safe. When you get in those places, that becomes very, very difficult for the coaches and the student athletes, because then they're getting mixed messages. And that's never been the case here at UIndy. And just thankful to that team and being able to work with them. And like I said, myself and Brian probably have way too many conversations, but it's just too important to be a team and make sure that sports medicine and administration are a team through all of this, and that we're on the same page with every decision that we make.
Hey, Scott, I've seen universities do the one-time only uniform or the throwback uniform. And I've always wondered, is that a recruiting tool or is that a revenue generator? Is that something we've looked at?
I've looked into that some, and it's just, there's such a cost involved with that, is that it's a one-time. I think you see that mainly at those places that have the huge apparel contracts and where those companies are willing just to throw those uniforms at you
Does a great job. Where?
At no cost. I think that's been kind of the thing, is that, I mean, for us, we would have to purchase those, and that's kind of a challenge from that aspect. So, I mean, if somebody is willing to throw us a a set of uniforms, I'll make sure that our student athletes put them on and wear them around everywhere. But if it's going to cause us to need to purchase those, we'll probably stick with what we got.
I got you.
Gary, thanks for the kind comments in the chat. I think that's a good message for all of us, the positive mental attitude. I think we all face the challenges and we get down at times, we get up at times. I say that for our student athletes and our coaches, the highs and the lows. I think that probably goes for myself and all the administrators and everyone else from UIndy on this call. I think we've all had a lot of highs and we've all had a lot of lows. And I think we just come back to work each day and just battle for the next one. I think we're all feeling the same way. I don't think that's just an athletics thing. And I don't think it's just a University of Indianapolis thing. Those that aren't here on campus, I'm sure each and every one of you are feeling the same things, a lot of highs and a lot of lows.
Any last questions for Scott? We still have maybe time for one or two more if someone's been sitting on a question they've been waiting to ask. Okay. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us for our final Hound Chat of the semester, and especially thank you to Scott Young for sharing his expertise, and really thank you for your leadership, not just for our student athletes, but our entire campus in these really unparalleled times. You have been a great colleague to work with, and your expertise, your leadership, and your care for our students is obviously front and center from everything you said today and everything we've seen prior to the Hound Chat. For those on the call, we still have, we don't have any more Hound Chats coming up, but we have several events that we are still in the works planning for the rest of the year. So be on the lookout for some additional communications from the university. We do have our Big Giving Tuesday coming up on December 1st. So Shining Through Because of You is the name of that event. So be on the lookout for more details regarding that, and could be a great opportunity to support the Greyhound Club on Giving Tuesday this year in light of all the things that Scott just shared with us. We also are in the works to do our traditional holiday with the Hounds. Obviously, that'll look very differently this year. So for those of you with kiddos that want to have a special experience, look for some information coming out soon from us about how we're going to do a virtual holiday with the Hounds, and some pretty fun ideas we're working on in that space. So from the University of Indianapolis, thank you all for what you're doing. We really appreciate you. Let's go Greyhounds, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.